Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprints. This is Canada's Conservative Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this program. Tell your friends they can download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You name it, it is out there. On today's show, we are talking about housing and how to make it more affordable for Canadians. To do that, we are bringing on the housing critic, the housing guru, Scott Aitchison, the Member of Parliament for Parry Sound, Muskoka, my next-door neighbor geographically, and also a former mayor of Huntsville, Ontario. Thanks for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Jamie.
All right, with your experience, you know about housing.
A little bit.
So tell us about our plan.
I think it's a brilliant plan. So, and the broad brushstrokes are fairly simple. What Pierre's promised to do is that when we form a government, when he's the Prime Minister, not soon enough, but soon enough when he is the Prime Minister, we will remove the federal sales tax on the purchase of a new home under $1 million. So this has the potential. So if somebody's buying a house that's $1 million, which is not unheard of
nowadays
in a lot of markets in
our
country, that has the potential of saving them $50,000 on the purchase price. That works out to about $2,200 a year in mortgage payments, and so it's a massive drop in the the price and the cost of government in this process. So it's actually a very simple concept. It's instead of giving money to cities and various different groups, this is like a cut so that Canadians pay less when they buy their house.
Yeah, I didn't think I needed to tee it up, and I really don't because you addressed some of it, but I think no matter where you are in this country, the cost of housing is out of control. People of all ages, especially the young people, right? They went from, just graduating high school or approaching that, going to college, university. They went to lockdowns to inflation, right? Like the whole world was in front of them, and all of a sudden you come out of this whole situation looking and trying to figure out how I'm ever going to get out of my parents' basement.
Absolutely. And of course, what a lot of Canadians don't realize, I don't think, is that in the cost to build a home, there's all kinds of costs related to build a home. But the majority of that cost, the biggest chunk of that cost, not the majority, but the biggest chunk of that cost is government fees and charges.
Yep.
About 33% is the average across this country. 33%.
So how do you build affordable housing in most cases to get the permits and the surveys, et cetera, et cetera? How do you build affordable housing if you're behind the 8 ball before you get a shovel in the ground?
Yeah, this is the problem. This is the problem right now, is that all levels of government are involved too. I hear from people all the time, oh, housing's not a federal issue. All levels of government are involved in this gig. The gig is up on government. So federal sales taxes, provincial sales taxes, all on the cost of every stick of lumber, everything that goes into that house. That's a huge amount of money. Well, in Ontario, it's 13%. 13% on everything, right? And so there's that, and then the purchase of the home, the province charges land transfer taxes.
Of course.
And then in the city of Toronto, they're permitted to charge precisely double the land transfer tax. You pay it twice in the city of Toronto. And then at the local level, there's all the fees and charges. So you can imagine, if a builder wants to build a subdivision, well, they've got to go through all the municipal approvals process, right? So that means you have to pay the fees for a subdivision plan approval. There's all kinds of studies and reports that municipalities demand for everything from, what's going to happen to the butterflies in that area to how much more, why did we have to make the road where the subdivision is going to be? And so they have to do all these studies and reports. It can take years. Time is money. That costs a lot of money to do that. Then, of course, when they get the approvals finally to build that subdivision, they have to build all the infrastructure in it, right? All the roads, all the power lines, all the water and sewer lines. They build all those things as part of the cost of building the subdivision. And then each single lot, they're charged a development charge on top of all of the things they've already built. So they built all the infrastructure, and then they get charged a development charge for any potential more growth-related things that have to happen because of this new subdivision. And they have to pay, here's the thing, they have to pay those development charges, which in some places are over $100,000 a lot. Just for the lot, just for the privilege of building a house. It's $100,000, right? So they have to pay that up front.
Right.
In often cases, because it takes a long time to build a subdivision. They've got to pay that up front, and they got to borrow the money to make it work. So they're borrowing the money, and all these costs, they go right to the bottom line. It makes that
all
house
put on
that
the
much
final
more
price. Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
So if you're paying $1 million for a house in a subdivision, and somewhere in the 905, for example, in any one of our communities, about $300,000 of that cost of that home goes all to government. All to government. And think about the amount of money that young people have to borrow to pay off that $300,000 in government charges and fees. It's no wonder that young people have just started to give up the hope of ever owning a home.
And are people getting value for the money? I guess that's up to the individual to decide. But at the same time, the largest conversation I hear many people talk about at the doors is getting the price of a house under control, but also making it affordable for new people. But as we just discussed, with every little bit layered on top of the price of housing, it's very difficult to actually make that happen, especially if you have a developer trying to make, say, tiny homes, for example, right? Even if you are hammered with these fees beforehand, it's still difficult to get that price point correct.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And here's the really crazy thing, right? I mean, what you have is a situation in this country where all levels of government are making out like bandits on housing. They are making a lot of money on housing. And so our plan, obviously reduces the amount of money the federal government will make on housing. And of course you hear the Liberals complaining, how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for that? Well, we'll pay for it by canceling these stupid Liberal programs. They're stupid.
That are just making prices more expensive.
Just make it more expensive. You're making the housing more expensive. And then what they're doing with this, like the Housing Accelerator Fund is a good example. It's a $4 billion fund, borrowed money too, by the way, since they're so in deficit. It's borrowed money. They take that $4 billion and then they give it to municipalities based on the promise that they'll be better on housing. So case in point, there's lots of examples, but I'll use Toronto as the first example.
Sure.
City of Toronto put in their application for their Housing Accelerator Fund, and they got the biggest chunk of money of anybody. Obviously, it's the biggest city. $471 million for the City of Toronto. And before the ink was dry on that agreement, they raised their development charges by 42%.
Wasn't that on top of another increase that happened just prior to?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now the development charge in the City of Toronto is $117,000.
That's incredible.
So they got $471 million, and they made it more expensive. And housing starts are down. The more expensive you make it,
yes,
the slower the starts are going to be.
Absolutely, because your market shrinks. Your available marketplace, your available buyers starts to shrink.
The solution to the housing crisis in this country, Jamie, is the most classically small C conservative solution you could imagine. It's less government.
That's right.
Less government.
Hey, one of the mottos of this show.
There
All right,
go.
let's cue up cut one. We have basically a quick clip outlining the announcement that our leader did, and with your help as well as the housing critic. But it seems to get, or has gotten so far, widespread compliments from across the aisle. So let's play cut one.
I looked to the opinion of Mike Moffett, the housing policy expert on this, and he said that it was not quite but almost perfect. He said that there was no other better policy put forward to date in terms of addressing accessibility to housing for middle-class Canadians. So I looked to that and I see, a pretty validating stakeholder there, endorsing the conservative policy. I also look at where Canadians are at in terms of, the age demographic that is most concerned about housing, and that's millennials, 30 to 45, and millennials are, yes, in their 40s now. And as they look to buy a house, which looks impossible for all of us, we look towards any policy that'll make that a little bit easier. So I can see why Canadians trust Conservatives the most on housing above any other party, because Conservatives are the only party that's talking to young Canadians on the issues that they care about.
Now, we are able, as a party, as a government in waiting, if you will, get the provinces to get on board with this. This could be even better for those looking to get into the housing market. This could really accelerate and probably alleviate some of the numbers that we are seeing in terms of people looking for housing and the prices as well.
It could be huge. And as you know, Jamie, Pierre has actually written to all the premiers encouraging them to follow suit, to do the exact same thing. So the federal sales tax is 5%. In Ontario, the provincial sales tax is 8%. Now imagine if you drop the price of that home another 8%. This is huge. This could be huge. It really dramatically impact the price of a home in this country. And so Pierre's, I think, done an amazing job of leading on this issue. He's calling on premiers to follow suit because they make even more money on housing than the federal government does. And honestly, Mike Moffett is, as Cole suggested, he is an expert on this file, and he thinks the move is brilliant because he points out all the time that governments make too much money on housing. He likes to hammer away at local governments.
And he's not necessarily a friend to conservatives either. So for him to come out and say that.
No, he's, I wouldn't say he's terribly partisan at all, actually, but he's definitely not, he's not a card-carrying Tory, let's put it that way. But he does understand that governments make too much money on housing. And he likes to continue to point out, too, that at the same time the federal, this announcement that Pierre's made that a federal government under him would remove the federal sales tax, cities still make too much money on housing, and they need to do the same kind of thing. In fact, I just did a video. I call out cities all over the place for the huge charges and the delays and the long, painful process people have to go through to get a home built. And I just did a video on Muskoka. My backyard. I used to be a town councilor and a mayor in Huntsville, as you said, and the District of Muskoka just approved a plan to increase their development charges by 30%. I just did a video on this. I said that this is wrong. So at the federal level, when Pierre is Prime Minister, we're going to do our part, but cities and regions and towns, they're going to do their part too. We've got to make it cheaper to build.
I know the goal is to let the builders build, right? Because the builders will provide the housing that the market needs, right? Usually not one more unit than the market needs, right? Or else you'd see a change in the price. It affects the price. But at the end of the day, do we have a specific goal on how many homes we're hoping to spark with this announcement? Or they accelerate with construction? Or is it basically as many as we can get on that the market can afford to absorb?
Yeah, it's a great question. And our conservative estimates are that this move alone, just the federal sales tax being removed from the cost of homes, will generate the construction of at least 30,000 more homes a year. So now imagine, in Ontario, if the province, reduced, their fees as well, their taxes, you could really start ramping this up. The CMHC has said we need to build millions of homes, right? And so now start combining this with some of the other things that we've committed to do, like axing the carbon tax. Carbon tax is on all the materials that go into a house as well, right? So you reduce that now, eliminate the carbon tax, eliminate the sales tax on homes at the federal level. Now you're really ramping up, getting homes built, getting them built cheaper. This is going to have a massive impact. Getting government out of the way, reducing the cost of government in this process in all these different ways, honestly, we'll be able to get a lot more homes built, and Canadians will be able to afford them again.
We're almost out of time, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that yesterday was Remembrance Day, and we were in our constituencies. We were attending Remembrance Day services to commemorate those who have fought for our freedom, paid the ultimate sacrifice, but also for those that continue to serve today or have served in conflict or in peacetime, at home or abroad. Thank you, everyone, for your service who has done that. And as you know, the guests get the last word, so the floor is yours. You can talk about whatever you want.
Well, I love talking about housing. I don't know if it shows or not. But
yes, you're passionate. That's why you're the critic. It's a good thing.
I got to tell you, I'm really excited about this announcement that Pierce made. It's precisely the kind of thing that we need to do. It shows real leadership. We can't get this current Liberal government out there fast enough. We need to make Pierre Poilievre the Prime Minister. We need to get these things done and get them done fast, and we can get this country moving again.
Scott Aitchison, Member of Parliament for Parry Sound, Muskoka, also the critic for housing. Appreciate your time. What a great note to end on. We appreciate yours as well. As Scott said, we want Pierre to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. I'm sure you do too, but we need your help. You need to like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Tell your friends they can download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify, because we need the ears to hear this message. You're probably not getting it in the mainstream media. Great way to do so. Don't forget, we have new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next week, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the Blue.